It was a Thursday afternoon like any other in the quiet suburbs of New Jersey, where the mundane often meshed seamlessly with the routine. I had recently hung up my badge, putting an end to a two-decade career that had seen its share of highs and lows. Retirement had been treating me kindly, offering a peace I hadn't known in years. But on that stormy, dark day, the past called me back to action in a way I couldn't have foreseen. I was at home, the rain pelting against the window panes, a book left unread on my lap as I found myself lost in thought. That's when the radio crackled to life, a sound I had grown all too familiar with over the years. It was a call for Car 204. That was me, or had been. Old habits die hard, and I found myself reaching for the radio instinctively. Car 204, please respond to a lockdown at the local middle school. Reports of a suspicious individual seen entering the premises. Proceed with caution. The voice on the other end was tense, and I felt that old familiar knot in my stomach. The school in question was one I knew well, having driven past it countless times, seen its students spill out onto the streets at the end of the day, full of youthful exuberance. But today, something was amiss. Without a second thought, I grabbed my coat and headed to the garage. The rain was relentless, and as I drove through the slick streets of my town, the wipers barely kept up. I pulled into the back parking lot of the school, the scene eerily quiet except for the storm. There, just as reported, was a white van parked haphazardly by the back entrance. No one was inside, and all the doors were securely locked. I approached the red back door of the school, the one that led directly into the gym hallway adjacent to the boys' locker rooms. It was uncommon for the main lights to be off during a lockdown, which only heightened the sense of urgency. Unholstering my flashlight, I entered, the beam cutting through the darkness like a knife. The hallways were deserted, the silence broken only by the sound of my footsteps and the distant rumble of thunder. I made my way to the main lobby, where the school's administrative heart beat. It was there I encountered the assistant principal, Mrs. Thompson, her face pale and drawn. "Officer, please check the boys' locker room," she whispered, her voice barely above a murmur. "We received a report that the individual might be armed. Be careful." Nodding, I called for backup, reassured by the dispatcher's prompt response that help was on the way. As I retraced my steps to the gym hallway, the weight of my old service pistol felt familiar in my hand, a reassurance in the creeping darkness. The locker room door creaked softly as I pushed it open. Inside, it was pitch black, the only sounds the white noise of the ventilation and faint, inexplicable noises, scratches and soft thuds against the metal lockers. My heart raced as I tried to locate the source, my flashlight's beam dancing across the rows of lockers. "Police." I finally mustered the courage to announce. No response came, only a continuation of the eerie sounds. It was then that a loud bang echoed through the room, a sound of metal on metal that had me jumping. It came from the direction of the football team's locker room, which was connected to the main one without a door separating the two. As I stepped into the larger space, the lockers loomed like giants in the dim light. That's when I heard it, a muffled cry for help. Help! The voice was weak, desperate, moving towards the sound. I found the row from where it emanated. "I'm here. Hold on," I shouted, trying to locate the exact locker. The cries grew louder as I approached, and finally, I saw the small fingers clutching the vents of a locker door. "I'll get you out, just hang tight," I reassured the voice, which I now recognized as that of a young boy, no older than 12. Frantic, I called for backup again, my voice urgent over the radio. I had to get the boy out, but as I turned to rush back for help, I noticed the white van was no longer there. Cursing under my breath, I informed dispatch to be on the lookout for the suspicious vehicle. It was crucial we find it. The van was possibly the key to understanding what was happening. Returning to the front office, I instructed the staff to begin evacuating the school, ensuring every student was accounted for. One of the teachers fetched the keys to the locker, and together we returned to free the boy. He stumbled out, a small cut on his arm, his eyes wide with fear. "He had a knife," the boy whimpered, clutching his arm. "He tried to take me." The reality of what could have happened had I been a few minutes later sank in, a heavy weight on my chest. We wrapped the boy's arm and waited for the paramedics and my backup to arrive. The school was secured, and slowly, order was restored. But the man with the white van remained at large. It wasn't until a week later that he was spotted in a convenience store parking lot, arrested after a tense standoff. The van was searched, revealing disturbing evidence of his intentions. As I reflect on that day, the storm outside mirroring the turmoil I felt within, I'm reminded of why I joined the force all those years ago. To make a difference, to protect and serve. Even in retirement, that call to action remains a part of who I am, a constant in the ever-changing landscape of life. In the days that followed the incident, the community was shaken but grateful that a tragedy had been averted. The boy, whose name I learned was Tommy, became somewhat of a quiet hero among his peers. The resilience of children is something to behold. He returned to school soon after, his spirit unbroken but his gaze a bit more wary. The man arrested, named Robert Clark, was an out-of-towner with no direct ties to our community, which only added layers to the mystery. How had he chosen our school? What had driven him to such a desperate act? These questions loomed large in my mind as I attended the debriefings and followed up on the case out of personal concern and professional habit. Robert was charged with attempted kidnapping and assault, among other offenses. As the case unfolded, it became clear that he had been planning this for some time. The van was equipped with makeshift restraints and had a small arsenal of tools and weapons hidden beneath a false floor. It was a chilling discovery that underscored the gravity of what had almost occurred. I visited Tommy a few times, checking in on him and his family, who were understandably overprotective of him now. His mother, a single parent since Tommy's father had passed away a few years back, was especially grateful. She invited me over for coffee one afternoon, and as we sat in their modest living room, the rain once again tapping against the windows, she shared her fears and her relief. "I don't know what we would have done if you hadn't been there," she said, her hands wrapped tightly around her coffee mug. "You didn't just save Tommy that day, you saved me too." Her words were heavy with emotion, and they reminded me of the weight of responsibility we carry as protectors, be it as police officers or parents. We chatted for a while longer, about life, the weather, and the small joys that make up our days. It was a simple conversation, but it grounded me in the reality of my retirement. I was no longer wearing the badge, but the oath I took stayed with me. The trial of Robert Clark was a brief affair, largely due to the overwhelming evidence against him and his own erratic behavior during the proceedings. He was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to a lengthy prison term. It was a relief, certainly, but it brought little closure. The questions about his motives and methods lingered, as did the shadows of what might have been. The school implemented new security measures, including enhanced surveillance and stricter access protocols. I was invited to consult on some of these changes, drawing on my experience to help fortify the place that had been vulnerable to such a dark intent. It felt good to be involved, to contribute to the community's safety in this new capacity. As the seasons changed and the leaves began to turn, marking the passage of another year, I found myself reflecting on my career and the unexpected chapters that followed. Retirement was supposed to be a quieter time, a period of relaxation and reflection. Yet, here I was, as engaged as ever, pulled back into the fray by circumstances I couldn't have predicted. I started writing about my experiences, first as notes, then as more structured pieces. It became a therapeutic exercise, one that helped me process my career and its dramatic end. These writings, raw and revealing, eventually took the shape of a memoir. It was a project born out of a need to understand my own journey and perhaps to offer some insights into the often turbulent world of law enforcement. As I penned the final words of my manuscript, sitting at my desk with the early morning light streaming in, I felt a sense of completion. The story of that stormy day, of Tommy and the dark intentions of Robert Clark, was just one of many. But it was a story that encapsulated the essence of what it means to serve, to protect, and ultimately, to confront the very real shadows that fall across our paths. With the manuscript complete, I decided it would be shared, not just with peers, but with the public. Maybe it would serve as a lesson, a reminder of the vigilance needed in our seemingly quiet lives. Maybe it would simply be a story that resonated with someone else, a beacon in their own storm. As I closed the cover of my laptop, the screen going dark, I looked out the window at the quiet street. Life goes on, ever changing, ever challenging. But whatever comes, I thought, I'm ready. For the peace, for the storm, and everything in between. It was a day like any other in my freshman year of high school, mundane, with the slow tick of the clock marking my boredom. I was seated in my third period math class, a subject I had no love for, idly staring out the window instead of paying attention to the equations on the board. From my vantage point at the back corner of the classroom on the second floor, I had a clear view of the front parking lot below, a view that often served as my escape from the monotony of algebra. On this particular day, my watchfulness was rewarded with something more exciting than the usual parade of teachers' cars and bustling students. As I gazed out, several police cars turned sharply into the school parking lot, their presence immediately piquing my curiosity. It was unusual to see law enforcement at our school, especially in such numbers, and it momentarily made me forget about my impatience to leave class. My desire to escape the boredom was due to more than just my disinterest in math. I had an orthodontic appointment to get my braces adjusted, a routine yet mildly painful affair, but it came with the bonus of getting out of school early. My mom was supposed to pick me up, and I was counting down the minutes until my escape. Just as I was pondering the reason behind the police arrival, the classroom doors swung open. The interruption came in the form of a student messenger holding a pass that I hoped bore my name. Sure enough, the teacher paused his lecture, took the pass, and called out my name. A small wave of relief washed over me as I gathered my things, received my homework assignment for the next day, and made my way to the front of the room to collect the pass. Exiting the classroom, I checked my phone and saw a text from my mom saying she was waiting at the side door of the school, which was unfortunately on the opposite end of the building. The hallways were unusually quiet as I began my trek, the earlier excitement over the police cars fading as I focused on meeting up with my mom. However, that calm was abruptly shattered by the sudden blare of the school's intercom. The announcement that followed sent a chill down my spine. Attention, students and staff. We are now in lockdown. Please follow all lockdown procedures immediately. Lockdowns weren't unheard of, but they were rare, and the timing couldn't have been worse. I was still a good distance from the side exit where my mom was waiting. The urgency to leave school before the lockdown procedures trapped me inside was overwhelming. I wasn't just worried about missing my orthodontic appointment now. There was a real fear about the reason for the lockdown and a strong desire to be anywhere but there. With my heart pounding in my chest, I quickened my pace, weaving through the empty corridors while trying to remain as silent as possible. The possibility of encountering a teacher who would usher me into a classroom loomed large, complicating my efforts to leave. As I approached a junction that would take me closer to the side doors, I heard footsteps echoing from a connecting hallway. Not wanting to take any chances, I ducked behind a row of lockers, holding my breath. When the footsteps seemed to hasten, I made a split decision to turn and head in the opposite direction, hoping to avoid whoever was approaching. The decision to run felt instinctive. As I rounded a corner, the footsteps behind me not only continued, but seemed to speed up in response to my own hurried pace. Fear gripped me, propelling me forward. I dashed down the stairs, praying that my pursuer wouldn't follow. But the sound of their steps on the stairs confirmed they did. Now on the first floor, I turned down another hallway, this one long and deserted, which echoed ominously with our footsteps. The final stretch to the side exit was just around the corner. As I dared a glance back, I caught sight of a man with long, stringy black hair wearing a black leather jacket. Not a teacher, not anyone I recognized. The sight of him spurred me into a full sprint. Rounding the last corner, the side doors were in sight. I burst through them, the cool outside air hitting my face as I spotted my mom's car. Relief washed over me as I jumped in, slamming the door behind me and urgently telling her to drive. I explained what happened as we pulled away, my eyes glued to the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the man following us. As we drove off, the sight of the police cars at the front of the school came back to me. Whatever was happening, it was serious, and somehow, I had been caught right in the middle of it. My mom dialed the school to report the man who had followed me, adding another piece to the unfolding drama of the day. Little did I know, the situation was far more complicated than I could have imagined, and the true nature of the threat within the school walls was yet to be fully understood. As my mom and I drove towards the orthodontist's office, the car was filled with an uneasy silence, punctuated only by the muffled sounds of the police sirens fading in the distance. My mom kept glancing at me, her eyes full of concern, repeatedly asking if I was truly all right. My own thoughts were racing, trying to piece together the events. The arrival of the police cars, the lockdown, and most unsettlingly, the mysterious man who had followed me through the school corridors. "Mom, why were there so many cops at school?" I finally asked, the question gnawing at me since I had seen the police cars earlier. "I don't know, honey. They didn't give me details, just said it was a security issue and that everyone was supposed to stay put," she replied, her voice tense. "But you did the right thing, getting out of there when you did." Her words were meant to comfort me, but they also underscored the gravity of the situation. As we arrived at the orthodontist's office, my mind was still back at school, pondering the possible dangers that had prompted such a serious response. The waiting room at the orthodontist was unusually crowded, leaving us to wait longer than expected. I couldn't focus on the outdated magazines or the daytime TV humming softly in the corner. Instead, I kept replaying the day's events, each detail sharpening into focus. The man's hurried footsteps echoing mine, his unexpected appearance at each turn as I tried to evade him. By the time we were heading back home, more information had started to trickle through social media and text from friends. Rumors swirled of a man on campus who had evaded police after a high-speed chase. It was surreal to think that my mundane school day had intersected with a police manhunt. When we finally returned home, the local news confirmed some of the rumors. The report detailed how a suspect, fleeing from a routine traffic stop, had crashed his car near the school and run onto campus. The man was reportedly trying to evade capture by blending in with the school environment. It was a chilling thought that the person I had seen and who had pursued me down the hallways was a fugitive. "That's him, Mom. That's the guy who was following me," I said, pointing at the blurry image of the man on the news screen. The realization hit me hard, a mix of relief and horror washing over me. I was safe now, but the danger had been real, more real than I had allowed myself to comprehend while it was happening. The next day, the atmosphere at school was charged with a mix of tension and an almost morbid curiosity. Police presence had increased, and there were hushed conversations at every corner of the hallways. Teachers and staff tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy, but the anxiety was palpable. In homeroom, our teacher, Mr. Jenkins, addressed the elephant in the room. "I know many of you are concerned and have many questions about yesterday's incident. I want to assure you that your safety is our top priority and that the administration is taking every necessary step to ensure a secure environment here at school." He went on to explain that the school would review its security protocols and that counselors were available for anyone who needed to talk. It was a small comfort, but the undercurrent of fear was hard to shake. I couldn't help but feel exposed, vulnerable in a place that was supposed to be safe. Throughout the day, I caught myself looking over my shoulder, jumping at sudden noises, and avoiding the hallways where the previous day's chase had occurred. The school felt different now. What was once a familiar and safe space now seemed fraught with hidden dangers. As the day wore on, the initial shock began to settle into a grim acceptance. Conversations with friends revealed that many shared my feelings of unease. We were all processing the event in our own ways, but there was a collective sense of violation. A shared space had been tainted by the intrusion of real-world dangers. That night, as I lay in bed, the events replayed in my mind. I thought about the police, the lockdown, the chase through the hallways, and the man with the stringy black hair. Each detail was etched deeply in my memory, a stark reminder of how quickly normalcy could be disrupted. The experience had left a mark, changing my perception of safety and trust. The halls of my high school, once a place of routine and sometimes tedious predictability, had transformed into something more complex and definitely more sinister. I drifted off to sleep, the images of the day melding into the shadows of my room, a reminder of the thin line between the ordinary and the extraordinary. In the days that followed the lockdown and the subsequent manhunt at my school, a palpable sense of apprehension lingered among the student body and faculty alike. Every corridor whisper, every hurried footstep seemed magnified, echoing the residual fear of what had transpired. The school had become a different place almost overnight, a place where the unexpected had breached the mundane, leaving a mark on our collective consciousness. As classes resumed their normal rhythm, the administration made a concerted effort to address the security concerns. Meetings were held with parents, students were briefed on enhanced safety measures, and local law enforcement made their presence felt, patrolling the campus with a reassuring frequency that was both comforting and a constant reminder of potential dangers. During these days, my own thoughts were conflicted. There was relief, certainly, at having escaped a potentially dangerous encounter unscathed. But there was also a deeper, more unsettling feeling, a questioning of the very sense of security that I had always taken for granted in the seemingly safe confines of my school environment. One afternoon, about a week after the incident, I found myself back at that same window in the math classroom, looking out over the parking lot where I had first noticed the flurry of police activity. The view was the same, yet my perception of it had irrevocably changed. It was as if the ordinary scene before me was overlaid with the transparency of that day's chaos, a visual reminder of how quickly normalcy could be disrupted. I wasn't the only one who felt this way. Conversations with my friends revealed that many were grappling with similar feelings. Even those who hadn't been as close to the situation as I had were affected by the ripple effects of the lockdown. We shared our stories and fears, finding some solace in the realization that we weren't alone in our concerns. The school counselors, aware of the undercurrent of anxiety, organized group sessions for students to discuss their feelings and fears. I attended a few of these, initially skeptical of how much help they could provide, but ultimately finding a measure of comfort in the shared experience. It was during one of these sessions that I fully realized the impact of what had happened. Hearing others articulate their fears helped me understand and accept my own. As the weeks turned into months, the incident began to recede into the background of our daily lives. The police finally caught the fugitive, a fact that was relayed to us in a school assembly. He had been apprehended without incident in a neighboring town, and with his capture, a collective sigh of relief seemed to sweep through the school. The normal routines resumed with a bit more vigor, and slowly, the sense of normalcy that had been so disrupted began to return.